Hi, and welcome back to part two of the Shane Plays Out of the Abyss Notes series, where I'm basically going through Out of the Abyss with my players, and then each week or after each session, um, giving an update on how things went, what I'm trying to do, maybe some notes and tips for other DMs. So, I didn't mention this last time, but if you're a player and your DM's wanting to run you through this adventure, you probably shouldn't listen to this because it's not really cool to know ahead of time the game. It upsets game balance. It spoils the sense of surprise and those sort of things. That being said, you're going to do what you're going to do. Just on behalf of all DMs everywhere, try not to read ahead in an adventure. It's just not as fun for everybody. So anyway, having said that, this week we had our second session. Hence, this is number two in the video series, and there we're still in Prisoners of the Drow, which is chapter one. Last week I did a lot of setup and a lot of introduction, a lot of exposition, really focused on the hopelessness of their situation, and then left them with a ray of hope where Jorlin, who's one of um, the Drow lieutenants of Ilvara, the Drow high priestess, basically offered them a ray of hope and said, if I were to offer you a way to escape, would you take advantage of it? Now, the way that I had this play out was he sort of teased it to one of the characters, uh, and then of course this week that player didn't show up, so I just kind of changed it over to a different character. I have to do that. I played a store, and because of that, I have some sort of flux in my players. I have a core, kind of a core group, and then I have other people kind of coming in and out. Now I had a new player um, that was coming with some other people who are pretty regular, and I had Jorlin approach that character with it because I was trying to help them feel included. Well, they didn't make it this time. So anyway, I just switched it over to another character, and in my group rolls with that stuff pretty easy. I prefer that kind of thing not to happen just for the narrative and the storyline and immersion. But you got to do what you got to do, and it didn't cause a big disruption. But he basically said, were I to offer you a way of escape, would you um, take advantage of it? And would who here would be interested in that? Uh, and it was kind of like, I don't want an answer right now because you need to talk to other people. So he said, I'll be back tomorrow and get your answer. So, that character, of course, shared it around, and there was some discussion among the group because there's a ton of non-player characters that are in the slave pens with them. And so there was discussion: who do we tell, who do we not tell, and the characters were a little bit leery of the players. There's of course there's a Drow who's in there for Drow crime. There's a Drow in there that's a slave prisoner with them that has been infected with molds or spores and committed a crime, doesn't remember doing it, and is basically being sent to Minzabranzan to his death. They were like, I don't know if we need to tell this guy. And then the orc Ront, they were like, I don't know if we should tell him. And then Topsy and Turvy, the two deep gnomes that are also were-rats, they were one of the characters like, I don't feel good about them, which is actually kind of cool because they're actually were-rats. Um, and I didn't really have, the only thing I did is I gave the description from the book that the sister is very talkative and friendly, and the brother is very surly, and you talk to the sister and she'll pass stuff to the brother and that kind of thing. And that's about all I left it at. But somebody said I don't feel very good about them, so they kind of picked up to something that's not quite right with those two. So, but anyway, one of the players or a couple of players was actually, look, they're all going to find out anyway. So they decided to just include everybody on the discussion, and everybody, all the NPCs were up for escaping. In fact, the Drow shared that he was on the verge of asking the player characters to kill him rather than be taken back to Minzo Baranzan. So And then, of course, the orc was like, yes, I want out of here. And the two deep gnome sister and brother, the twins, they want out because when the full moon comes along, they're turning into were-rats. So they want out and escaped before that happens, before everybody finds out that they're really lycanthropes. So when Jorlin came back the next day, it was shared, yes, we want out. And he said, okay. And basically he said, I will offer you a few helps. And after that, it's up to you. I have no further part in it. Now, what I did not share with them, but I did hint that he doesn't care if they escape or not. Well, he cares if they escape. He doesn't care if they live, really. He just wants to cause embarrassment to Ilvara because she's replaced him as her favorite with the other younger Drow Lieutenant Shore. Because Jorlin, of course, used to be her lover and her favored lieutenant, and then he got into a fight with a black pudding, and his face is all scarred up and all that. And since then, he's lost favor. So he just wants to cause her and Shore embarrassment. That's his goal. Um, but I didn't share that with him. But he was like, "Look here, I will offer you some helps, and what happens after that is none of my affair." That's kind of where he left it. And the helps he offered were he gave them a set of thieves' tools, so the rogue could, undo their manacles and get them out the front door or the gate of the slave pen. He told them the guard tower, the stalactite that's hanging, where they can see the slave pen that has the guards in it, has an armory in it with some, he highly suggests trying to get into that armory for, armor and weapons and whatnot. And also in that armory, I chose to do this. This isn't in the book or in the adventure guide. I put a small chest that had the wizard's spell book, and one of my characters, even though I had said don't worry about equipment, had made like an orb, a trinket part of his backstory. So I put that in there just to be nice DM. So what you're supposed to do is if you can make it into Ilvara's quarters, then all of their possessions are in there, and I didn't see them being able to make it in there. It's just there's too many Drow, too much craziness. Plus, I'm about to explain now, I combined two escape options, which some other DMs had recommended in their blogs and whatnot. And one was the Jorlin offering escape, and then two, there's a demon attack that happens simultaneously. So I was really like, you guys, y'all have to escape. I didn't see them wanting to make it into Ilvara's chambers. In fact, one of their escape plan points was they wanted to try to destroy the rope bridge from Ilvara's chambers and the shrine and all that to the main platform. So they had no intention of going in there anyway in their planning. So anyway, one other thing I want to point out, I didn't mention this last time, but one of my players decided to play a blind character. The rogue is blind. His name is, is it Fingers? I think it's Fingers, but I have to double check. I've got a little list of all the player character names. But anyway, so he's playing a blind rogue, and what I've done with this, rather than just say no, you can't play a blind character, he's obviously going to have disadvantage on attacks, and he's going to have advantage on attacks against him in combat. I'm not going to allow him to have ranged sneak attacks because he can't see anything. But if he's in melee combat and that his enemy is also engaged in melee with another player, then I'll allow sneak attacks. And what I did, just for the sheer audacity of wanting to play a blind character, I said by default, once per session you have inspiration. So rather than just disallowing it. Now I had, one of my players is a bit of a rules lawyer. Not a really irritating rules lawyer. Usually his knowledge of the rules helps, but sometimes he'll be like, well, you can't do this or you can't do that. And for the first time in playing with him for close to a year, finally last night I had to say, well, that's at my discretion. okay, because he was like really arguing, you can't sneak attack this or that, he's blind. So well, that's at the DM's discretion. So I tried not to be too heavy-handed about it, and but I was like, I can at my discretion allow or disallow certain things. So to try for the novelty and the interesting role play and other things of one of my characters wanting to play a blind character, or one of my players want to play a blind character, that's what I've come up with right now, and we'll probably refine it as we go along, assuming that he survives, because he got knocked unconscious twice last night, mixing it up with a Quaggoth. So, and he may not survive because a Quaggoth is getting multi-attacks already and getting advantage on everything. I mean, it's, we'll see what happens, but I'm not going to disallow it. Anyway, so back to the escape. They, he said, hey, the helps he offered were, you need to get to the armory. Here's your lock picks. And, tonight when the guard normally changes, and I will delay that, so there will be a brief time where there's no guards at the front door, and that was basically the helps he offered. And he reminded them that he's like, how you get out of here is up to you. He reminded them that it's 100 feet up and all that. Now they know about the lift, but they're kind of leery of fighting their way over there because they know a lot of the just from the activity they've seen, they suspect that a lot of the warrior barracks are by the lift, which they are. And now to the way it's laid out, when you leave the slave pens, if you go west, is the majority of the outpost, including the priest quarters or the priestesses and the shrine and all the lift and most in the warrior barracks and all that for both the elite warriors and the regular Drow warriors. And then if you go east is the Quaggoth pen. There's like a stone stairway going down to the Quaggoth pen, and there's a little outpost down there with a couple of Drow in it, or watch post or something like that. They have a pretty good idea of the layout of everything, but they don't know what's east. They don't know that down those stone steps is a Quaggoth lair, and or the Quaggoth room where all the Quaggoths stay, and then there's a little outpost, a little watch point there with a couple of Drow in it. So they're as I was listening to them discuss how do we escape, their plan is to bust out, go down the stone stairway to the east, and hope to find an escape point, which there isn't an escape point there. They don't know that, but that's their plan. So anyway, so that's kind of their plan. Get to the armory, get some weapons and armor and whatnot, and then cut west and run. Find a way out. So the way I'll see. I don't know how well this will show up, but here I don't know how. There's Velkenver right there. This is the outpost that they're in, and where they're at is here. And what they're wanting to do is bust out and cut that way, but there's actually not an escape route that way. This is where the Quaggoths stay. There's a little Drow watch post with a couple of Drow there. Now there's a lift over here that four medium-sized creatures at a time can go down, but they're not going to try to make their way because there's barracks and all kinds of stuff over here, and that's where the priestesses' quarters is, and so they didn't want to go this way. So that was kind of their plan. Now, another thing they talked about was there's rope bridges that lead to the watchtower stalactite that's right across from the slave pen, and there's another rope bridge that leaves it that goes to the rest of the outpost to the west. So they were talking about, well, we got to cut those rope bridges. So I talked to them and I said, well, that can be done, but this isn't like in some like old black and white King Kong movie where it's like chop chop and the bridge goes down. I mean, they're pretty darn sturdy. So I made that point to them. So here's how it all played out. I gave, just for the sake of time, I gave the rogue I said, just give me one roll for lock picking and one roll for stealth to see if you can get all the manacles off without uh, the guards noticing. And he pulled that off. So they had their manacles off. And then um, they, as promised, the guard change happened where the guards that are watching left, and the replacement guards didn't show up. So there was sort of a window there where there was nobody directly watching the slave pen. Now there was still the stalactite that's across from it, where that's a constant guard post that's watching everything around the cavern, including the slave pen. So they were still there, but the actual guards of the slave pen were not there. Now, when the rogue was trying to pick the lock, he failed twice. So, and what I was leading up to doing was I was going to let him keep trying, and it was going to get more and more tense, and then they were going to see the replacement guards kind of showing up to make things more and more tense. And then, if he wasn't getting it open, everyone was going to be getting all freaked out, and then I was going to have the demon attack start. So that was my plan. But as we know, players have plans of their own. So the half-orc paladin player, Mara, she's a half-orc paladin. One of her flaws is that she will use combat and strength to overcome situations when she's angry or frustrated. So after the second failed attempt, while the rogue was still trying to pick the lock to get out of the slave pen, she charged it and said, I'm just going to try to knock the door down. And it said in the book that it was a DC 20 strength check. And I hadn't said anything about this, but she just charged it, hit it, and rolled a 22 once everything was said and done. So I just ruled that just blang knocked the door down. And, while the rogue is like, trying to lockpick. And then across the way, the guards in the watchtower are like, oh, and, they see what's happening. And then the replacement guards had just showed up, and they were coming to the watchtower. And so I was like, wow, so I'm setting all that up. And several players says, because their plan was they were going to get out of the door and just charge the watchtower and try to just overwhelm the watchtower with surprise and numbers and that sort of thing. Which, had I allowed that to play out, as is, a couple of player characters could likely have died because there's an elite Drow warrior in there with a couple of regular Drow. That elite Drow warrior is CR5. So that was not probably going to be a good plan. But I try not to micromanage my players. If they want, I reminded them there's a elite Drow warrior and all that in there, and that was their plan. So they charged, and at that very moment when they're just charging out and the door's just out, I said, man, there's this really insane, crazy droning noise and horrible inhuman shrieking, and alarms start ringing all over the outpost. And this is the demon attack where 4 Chasmes are fighting with 2 Vroks. And I said, shapes start flying around. So right at that moment, right when they're busting free and things are about to go crazy into combat, that's when I unleashed the demon attack. And they were like, the way they set it out, there was like a couple of the player characters and the NPC orc, Ront, were running across the rope bridge. The dwarf, Eldith NPC, was coming up behind them, and they were just charging. And to reinforce the danger of the situation, I just described a shape flies through, and Ront just disappears. The orc just disappears, and you hear it's a terrible sound, an orc screaming. You've never really heard that. And so Ront's gone. Ront's dead. So first NPC death of the campaign. And I did that, and I just made it boom, like he's just gone. And I did that to reinforce, man, this demon attack, and they don't know what it is yet. It took them several rounds to realize it was demons. to reinforce this is a bad situation. So what I had happen narratively was, uh, they kind of kept charging. Um, the Drow prepared for them, but when the I made it apparent uh, by the body language and the facial expressions of the Drow in the watchtower that they were charging, that stalactite, that the Drow their attention was divided between them and what was going on for the outpost. Like, what do we do here? So what I had happen was I left 3 Drow, regular Drow warriors, and then the elite Drow grabbed another couple of Drow, because remember there were several in there. The relief guards were coming through the watchtower, and the regular watchtower complement was there. And the elite Drow warrior left to go to the rest of the outpost with a couple of the Drow, leaving 3 Drow. So that's what I did to give them some combat, but not make it so overwhelming they don't have a chance of winning. And as it turned out, I actually, they really kind of mowed through that. And because there's a monk who at first level, just the way it worked, totally legally. I watched the rolls, I watched the configuration of the character, just kicks butt. I mean, he's got he's got an 18 AC with no armor on, and he's just ridiculous. So, which I love monks, so I was like kind of impressed that he put that character together. But I watch it, it's totally legit. There's no trickery. It's a legit character. But anyway, so the monk, the half orc, and the dwarf and whatever, they make it into the watchtower and they're fighting. And long story short, the monk is like dropping Drow like nobody's business. So while that's going on, now that they're out of the slave pen, the wizard, who can now use his magic, starts throwing firebolts at the bridge that connects the watchtower post to the rest of the outpost. So not the bridge that connects the slave pen to the watchtower, but the other bridge. So firebolt catches it on fire, doesn't do enough damage to to destroy it outright. And when I was like in my mind, I was like, I'll give it about 3 rounds, and then I'm going to say it burns up, and whatever. But in the meantime, it's on fire. So several, for the next several rounds, I keep stressing there's these creatures battling in the air. The Drow really seem formed up on them, although the Drow in the watchtower still has their attention on them. And I give them descriptions, and I show, without revealing the monster manual stats and name, I kind of show them the pictures of what's happening. Because at first they're like, what is it? The one guy thought it was the Chasme was a spider killer, spider hunter, or something like that. I don't know. But anyway, so I'm really reinforcing this is just a really crazy, ridiculous situation. So they take care of the Drow in the watchtower pretty easily, which kind of surprised me, because they're all first level characters with really no weapons. They're using manacles as improvised weapons, and there's at the beginning of the adventure, when you roll on that table, they had like a flint shard and an iron post that could be used as a club. That's like it. So they were really doing better than I thought they would. So what I had happen was 2 more Drow came across the rope bridge that's on fire now to try to get in, and Eldith, the female dwarf NPC, was like, I will hold this door, because it says she's very caring and very brave and self-sacrificing. I figured she would die. As things turns out, she didn't. She did pretty well. And characters are getting up in the armory upstairs, finding the armor, finding the wizard spell book and the orb. I had trapped the chest with Drow poison, like the chest in Elvara's quarters is, and it actually triggered on one of the NPCs, or on one of the PCs, but they made their Constitution saving throw, so they just took a point of damage. What I had happening otherwise was because they were dropping the Drow so quickly. Um, I brought 2 Quaggoth into the mix, and I intended them to only fight 1 Quaggoth. I knew that they weren't going to be able to handle 2, so a couple of Quaggoths end up coming up that stone stairway from where the Quaggoths stay to the east. And what I had happen is one of the Quaggoths, a Chasme, flew by and impaled it with its little, needle nose proboscis thing, whatever that is. It took care of that Quaggoth. So that was just for dramatic effect, to scare them. Oh, we got 2 Quaggoths, and then there's just one really. Um, and then so they're fighting, and that Quaggoth ended up being, I really, in retrospect, wish I would not have brought that Quaggoth into the mix. It took them several rounds to beat it. It dropped the rogue twice, and the cleric had to heal up the rogue twice. Multiple, they're the bard's mocking it. People are shooting it with recovered drow hand crossbows. The monk makes its way over through acrobatics and flips over to fight it, and the monk gets knocked out, and the rogue gets knocked out twice. So this Quaggoth was really nasty, and it's only CR2. So, and it dragged things out, because where I'd wanted things to end by last night's session is that they were out of the outpost and that they were ready to go, which would do we, because there's 3 exits from the outpost or from the cavern floor that lead to different directions, and the NPCs want to go various directions. So I wanted to leave it like, where are we going next, and then pick up there next time. But because of the Quaggoth, and we ended up going like probably another 30 minutes last night, longer than we normally do. We usually go 2 hours, but we went about 2.5 last night. And the reason we're 2 hours is because it's at a store, so there's set times. And also, we have like younger kids that have to go, like their dad picks them up right at 8:30 and that sort of thing. So that was, I should not have put the Quaggoth in there. Either that, or I should have fudged how many hit points they had or something. But because it was really a challenge to them. Multiple Drow did not turn out to be regular rank and file Drow, not an elite warrior, did not turn out to be a challenge to them. So narratively, what I had going on is, as the rounds progressed, the Drow started, Ivara shows up on the scene, and Jorlin and Shore, and they start, getting things organized. And, they actually, at one scene that I described, they all concentrated fire on one Chasme and knocked it out of the sky into the spider webs below. So the Drow are starting to get it together. And I reinforced that these demons are fighting among themselves. They're not really super concerned with the Drow and the characters, but occasionally, they will, if they happen to come close enough, they'll attack an NPC, or they'll attack a Drow, or they'll whatever. So, I just wanted to more be about ambiance and what's happening in the craziness of the situation. Another interesting thing that happened, which I think will help lead to their escape, is the wizard firebolted the rope bridge again and rolled a natural 20. And I just said, okay, it just obliterates, it just shatters. And a couple interesting things happened to that. One, part of the flaming bridge fell into the spider webs and started burning through the spider webs. So now there's a nice big hole, if they're thinking right, because there's several coils of rope in the armory that they can go down through and hopefully not have to encounter the spiders directly that are in the spider webs. Second thing was, there were 2 Drow on the rope bridge trying to fight their way into the watchtower that Eldith was defending against. And I gave them both saving throws. The first one failed. He's like, ah, and he dropped. The second one managed to hold on and kind of push his way into the watchtower. So that was interesting from the rope bridge going. So long story short, Eldith proved her worth and dropped him, and then picked up a hand crossbow and went to the window and started helping fight against the Quaggoth. So the Quaggoth eventually dropped, and that's where I had to end things, because we're already 30 minutes over. So again, if I had it all to do it over again, I either would not introduce the Quaggoth, or else I would fudge its hit points or its rolls or something like that and let them drop it a little easier. because the Quaggoth was just to give them a little bit more of a challenge since they were going through the Drow so quickly. Now we had one player character got reduced to 0 hit points twice. Another one got reduced to 0 hit points once. Now the monk on his death saves rolled a natural 20 and managed to stabilize and have 1 hit point. So that avoided the cleric needing to directly intervene because the cleric's trying to keep the rogue alive who got reduced to 0 hit points twice by the Quaggoth. So that's kind of where we left things. What I hope to do next time is get them to the cavern floor. I'm going to strongly encourage, without trying to micromanage them, through restating the situation. They've got rope. The Drow are distracted with the demons, and there's a nice big hole in the spider web, which I didn't plan on that. That kind of happened with them setting the bridge on fire, that they can work their way down through and get to the cavern floor. So that's what I'm going to recommend. So, or not recommend, but kind of restate things to hope that that's the path they take. Assuming that they get to the cavern floor, between interactions with the NPCs, which all have different ways they want to go, and that's laid out pretty well in the book, what NPCs know which areas where they want to go. And then there's a whole section, chapter 2 deals with travel, random encounters, foraging, that sort of thing. So my intention is, next session is, hopefully they'll get to the cavern floor, spend the rest of that session traveling, foraging, introducing them to what it's like to roam the Underdark, maybe have a random encounter, and then bring them to the verge of showing up somewhere, wherever their destination is, but not actually get into it on the next session. So and there's multiple directions it can go. It's kind of open-ended in a lot of ways. There's no linear path they have to follow. So that's kind of where things went. That's what I hope to accomplish next session. Enjoying this more than I thought I would. I kind of didn't want to do. I was like, I don't want to be in the Underdark. And I mean, I like Out of the Abyss, but I don't know if I want to run it. It seems kind of claustrophobic and Underdark and kind of dark and grim, evil. But I am enjoying it more than I thought I would. So, and my players seem to be enjoying it too. So, thanks so much for listening and watching, and we will catch you next time on the Shane Plays Out of the Abyss notes. And if you like this video, please leave a thumbs up on YouTube, maybe a comment. And if you have any tips or want to share experiences or whatever, feel free to leave in the comments. I really appreciate it.